Okay, my advanced geometry suspension system actually started at the end of the '86 season when I was building, engineering, and managing the Saline endurance race team at SCCA Pro Endurance Racing. And I mean, Mustangs, the Fox Mustangs, you know, were a challenge to turn into a race car. The brakes were small, the suspension geometry was bad. And I'd hooked up with a guy I knew in the Mustang group at Ford, and he worked in the evenings. We talked back and forth on different, you know, moving things around, improving the geometry of cars that they would turn. And I really couldn't do anything about it until '87 when Steve, with his magical connections, came up with 3 K members that were virgin, no holes in them. And all the stuff that Mike and I had figured out, I put into these K members and made them look like factory fresh, brand new. But I actually had a lot of geometry that really helped the cars turn. So that kind of like started the whole advanced geometry suspension system. And it's like each generation from the original is an improvement on the previous. It improves on the best parts of the previous and makes it even better. So and here's how it kind of goes in chronological order. AGS 1.0 was a carryover from the Saline R race cars, revised K-member geometry, and we had, because the chassis needed stiffness, we added double cross subframe connectors, first to market with that. We added jacking rails, first to market with that. We added the anti-squat traction bracket, their 3-point strut tire brace, and matrix brace, first to market on all those. And the anti-squat traction brackets, first to market on those. That was back in about 91, 92 maybe. So all of those parts have been copied heavily ever since, but they were designed around, you know, front geometry, add some anti-squat to the back, and then stiffen the chassis. Because stiffer chassis means car handles better. And then in 93, we kind of upped it a little bit. We carried over the front geometry, except I changed it into what I call fixed strut. And, you know, that happened one night when I was working on a car, and it was a gas charged shock strut. And I was moving it out of the way to work on something, and I kind of pulled it down and moved it over the side. And I noticed that the angle of the rotor was really strange. It was like a lot of positive camber, and put the other way, a lot of negative camber. So I sat down and I started plotting, before computers. So I started plotting a whole bunch of different camber curves, just moving the top of that strut around until I found the spot that gave the absolute best. It increased negative camber on the outside tire, increased positive camber on the inside tire. So that's when we came up with the fixed strut design. And back then we used the onion heads. I don't know if you remember these onion heads from the SVO Mustangs at the top rather than the factory bushings. And when they ran out, then we switched over to our own, we call it Caster Plus, because by moving it all the way back, we get more cash than anybody else, and it just helps improve the geometry. And then we added a panner bar at the back, or first to that, but the panner bar was not to center the axle, it was to move the roll center down. If you do the geometry on a live axle, Fox or SN95, the rear roll center ends up like, I can't remember, 18 inches high, like almost in the trunk. And what that does is that makes the back of the car want to really roll around freely and makes back the car loose. So using the panner bar, we're not using it to center the axle because it's got splayed control arms. We're using it to move the roll center down, because where that panner bar crosses the center line of the car is the roll center. And that's where in Trans Am cars, we ran the roll center at the bottom of the diff by putting a Watts link horizontal on the bottom of the differential. So that was something that we added in AGS 2.0. Now, AGS 3.0, we actually introduced, I can't remember if it was 2000 or 2001 SEMA show, one of the two, on Kermie, my wonderful green track car that was amazing to drive. But we actually took the time, what we learned from all the suspensions previous, we actually did a clean sheet of paper, tubular K-member, control arms, and then improved the rear geometry. So we had a complete package, so to speak, to go with, you know, we had the front suspension to go with the rear suspension. And then we also in 2001 came up with AGS 3.5, which was specifically for the S550 Mustang Cobra with IRS. And I pretty much fixed the geometry in the IRS. It did a couple of nasty things in stock trim, and I found that out testing FR500 with Ford Racing down at Road Atlanta. At a certain point, the car got loose, and I figured out what it was. We fixed that all in geometry. Geometry is something we learn a lot about in the Speed Therapy Academy. So if you want to learn more about that, think about joining the Academy.
Also, you really improved the rear wheel hub.
Oh yeah, I mean
we have a kit for that.
Yeah, I mean we also improved the rear axle hop. I mean everything we do with the IRS is nobody else in the aftermarket supports the IRS. Nobody else understands it. Nobody else has to know to make the geometry work. So we're still supporting 9904 Cobras because it's I know how to make them work. And this is we're going to talk front suspensions. This is the front grip kit for an SN95. And it's a tubular K-member, control arms, and that's a very unique design, and I'll show you one of those in a minute. And the caster plates, Caster Plus, to get the extra caster in there, and the front sway bar. And that's pretty much the front grip kit for an SN95. So, yeah, and well, actually, I'm looking at the picture. We've actually upgraded both the K-member and as far as changing some of the strength points, and also the control arms, which I can show you one right now. Okay, here's an SN95 control arm, and you can see it's kind of a unique design. Nobody else builds a control arm like this. Everybody else is kind of like, some control arms don't even have a cross brace on them. They're just a couple of bars, which is not particularly good. There's no strength in that. And other people just kind of put a bar at the bottom, which is, it's better. The bar needs to be really close to the bushings, though, to make a full triangulation and make it strong. But this design is so unique. We actually get two triangulations. Okay, we get a triangulation here, and then we get triangulation here. So we get two triangulations. This thing is super, super strong, and it's the only thing like it in the aftermarket. And since the picture, we've upgraded to bigger, stronger bushings. Okay, back to AGS 4.0. Time to drink coffee. Yep. Okay, in 2005, I was absolutely elated with the S197 Mustang. I mean, the suspension that Ford put in that car just made my life so much easier. I mean, it was like a dream come true. The front control arms, rather than being splayed, they were parallel to the center line of the car, which gives it makes it much easier to correct and get improved geometry with a parallel control arm versus a splayed like in S95. And the back was magical too, because it was parallel 3-link with a panel bar. Actually, isn't really parallel. The lower control arms are splayed from the factory, but in the rear grip kit, we changed that. We unsplay the lower control arm, make it parallel to the center line. And we've been doing that for a long time. I'm starting to see a few other companies out there doing that same thing. It'd be interesting if you asked them why they did that and what their answer is. Yeah, because it would be interesting to hear what their answer is. The real reason I do that is to have an impact on the rear roll axis. Make the point of conversion infinity, which means the roll axis follows the parallel lower control arms, which is what we're looking for. I don't know if other people would tell you the same thing or not. So anyway, we got the tubular front K-member, which we're going to talk about in a minute, which all the geometry I had in 3.0 got even better in 4.0. And of course, the rear geometry, the rear grip kit, anybody has ever put one in their car will tell you it is amazing. I mean, it really, really works. I mean, it just settles down the back of the car, and the two together, there's only 3 parts of my suspension: the rear grip kit, front grip kit, and springs and shocks. Because I engineer systems. It's all about systems. And with the S197, I could do everything I wanted to do in geometry. because my philosophy behind AGS 4.0, expands on the previous 1, 2, and 3. And the thing about, on track, in racing, the best opportunity to have overtake somebody is under braking. So one of the first things I did is I engineered anodine in front and a squat in the back, so that you can brake a lot later. Now Mustang, you look at it, it's a drag racing car, big V8 motor in the front, light back end with a live axle. So the strength is straightaway, and the weakness is stop and turn. So by doing all the anodine and squat, all of a sudden you can brake a lot later, like 2, 3 car lengths later, which meant you just made that straightaway longer, and you can actually outbrake a lot of people. And then with the front geometry, I could get everything in on the front geometry, so when you do brake later, you go much deeper into the corner than you normally would, and when you turn the wheel, front turns. So you can get the car to rotate pretty quickly, and getting around the corner is a weak part of the Mustang, so if it rotates really quickly, and with the front roll center up, the rear roll center down, you don't have to wait nearly as long to get back to the gas, so you're feeding gas in before the apex. So you carry a lot more speed off the corner with much higher corner exit speed. So the corner exit speed, you just made the next straightaway longer. Longer straightaway, shorter corners. That's the whole philosophy behind the AGS 4.0, and it works exceptionally well. I mean, there's some videos out there of me, in Ruby, my 2012 track car, and I chased down some pretty potent cars. And it's just because the car carries so much mid-corner and so much corner exit speed, brakes later. It's a great suspension. But to make that even better, again, we always improve on everything. We're just introducing, in very limited introduction, AGS 4.5, which Speed Therapy Academy people were the first to see that. It's a new rear suspension that's beyond belief. And it's so good. I've been working on it for years and years. That it's applied for a patent, so it's patent pending. But the first batch, pre-production batch, the Speed Therapy Academy guys bought it out, gone. And then we introduced it. The next introduction was the Speed Therapy Society people, and again a closed introduction. And we're at 15, 16.
No, 27.
Okay. I guess we've sold 27. So because of the response that we're getting, we're actually going to push back the general introduction to the media and the general public, just simply because we're afraid that the response is going to be so huge. We're already getting overwhelmed, so we're going to push that back a while. But when you get to see it, it kind of blow your mind. So anyway, that's AGS 4.5, but let's take a look at the front grip kit. Okay, here's the front grip kit, and it is pretty darn basic. It's a K-member and control arms. Now, you really can't buy the K-member or control arm separately unless you're planning on putting them together at some point, because they're both engineered to work together. I mean, the control arms we have won't work with a stock K-member because you won't get a geometry. And, a stock control arm isn't really going to work with the K-member because, again, you're not going to get the geometry. So, I mean, all it is the K-member, control arms, and the bump steer tie rod ends, which you can see they're OE style. Bump steer tie rod end, which means you don't have to figure anything. You just put it on. It's quiet. It's as durable as a factory one right out of the box. So that's kind of like the front grip kit that we don't really talk a lot about. Let me show you one of the front control arms. Okay, this is the front control arm off of S197, and you can see this baby is stout. I mean, this is heavy duty, heavy wall tubing, triangulated, gusseted, and extended ball joint. Extended ball joint helps bring the roll center up. That's something we were the first to do back a long, long time ago with our original geometry and AGS. But wasn't any ball joints available, so what we did was use stock or ASA ball joint with a longer shaft and adapted it to Mustangs. We were the first to do long shaft ball joints, and now they're pretty prevalent. But you can see, and of course, anything that we do, everything I do is serialized. If you're looking to buy some parts from somebody. They say it's Kenny Brown. If it doesn't have a serial tag, if it doesn't have a serial tag, then it's not genuine. And we started doing this years. You can see we're up to what, 70,000. We started doing this years and years ago, simply because all the stuff I could market, everybody was copying it. And most of it wasn't a very good copy because people didn't know why they were copying it. They just copied it. So that's when we started putting a serial tag on, so you know it's genuine Kenny Brown. And something is really important is these are the pins for the control arm bushings. And I use urethane. I don't like Delrin for the street. Delrin is for racing, not for street cars, not even for track cars. We use urethane, and a few years back we switched over to black urethane because it's silicone impregnated. But we always ship the pins separate because you need to. This is a handy dandy little tube of grease, and this is nasty stuff. And you get it on your fingers, it just doesn't come off. I think somebody said WD-40 will take it off, but if you got gloves, use gloves because it's super sticky and it's super. But you need to put it inside the bushing. Put inside the bushing, and then you push your pins through, and then you want just a real light coating on the outside, a super light coating. You want to get all the excess off because if you have too much on the outside, it's a dust magnet. So you want just a super light coating on the face so it moves well in the K-mount. So that's kind of the AGS front suspension system and a little history of how it all came together. So I think I've pretty much got through what I want to talk about. I think that was the last picture. Yep. That's it. Oh, I forgot. Oh, one more. Thank you. Part of AGS 4.0 is caster, maximum caster. So these are the caster camber plates. Remember, in AGS 3.0, we have caster plus, which is a fixed caster and with maximum caster. And with these, what we do is we put maximum caster in. No matter what it is, side to side, doesn't matter. Put all the caster it'll take, and then adjust the camber, based on the condition. So that's kind of like the other part of the AGS 4.0, and also an AGS 3.0 converts to coilover shocks, coilover struts. It's simply because it just takes a bunch of weight out, and it just spring on control arm. You have no control over the spring or ride height. So everything we do is coilover, and we actually have coilover specifically made to my shock data on shock dynos. And Strange makes them for us, but it's not their shock. It's their parts, but it's my valving strategy. And we've got for S95 and Fox a great coilover package. We can only get the fronts in double adjustable, which is, that's okay. But I tell people to leave the bump alone and just play with rebound if you're tuning the car, or call me and I'll tell you.
Actually working close with getting a S197 that's more cost effective than
Yeah, I carry a good note. We're working on trying to put together an S197 coilover with Strange, which would be a more cost effective option for people other than, the JRZs are a premium shock, and man, what a great shock they are. Great shock. I mean, I think that's one of the keys that my late son Paul in winning the GTS championship and probably World Challenge in 2011 is that great shock package, race shocks from GRZ. The race shocks are stupid expensive, but they've come out with an RS line which is far better tuned in to the street performance, track day, and club racer. And it's kind of like what I like about that is the RS series that are more. I mean, they're not cheap, but you get what you pay for. They're actually custom built for me in the Netherlands and then flown over. GRZ, if you look them up, their primary business is race shocks, and they sell a lot of super high-end race shocks. So the RS series that we use is kind of like really expensive race shocks, premium race shocks, kind of work down for the club guy and track day guy. Where a lot of the other like coilover shocks that are available are mostly kind of street shocks that are kind of tuned up. So that's why the JRZs are so good. We're working on with Strange to see if we can put together a coilover package for S197s, which would have the same front valving in the strut I use in the SN95, and then the rear valving is going to be it's a different valving for a live axle, but for it's going to be for the new rear suspension, secret rear suspension. It's going to be a double adjustable because we have to really high spring rate to make the car, to balance the car with the new rear suspension. So we're working on those things, and we'll have them, if it works out, we'll have it for both live axle and the AGS 4.5. So that coming, we're working on it. It'll be, and it's kind of like, it's going to be a jump above our real popular street track package now is the Eastern RSS, which is spring rates are great and the shock valving is great. But it's, you've got some limitations. The shocks, rears are non-adjustable, and you're kind of stuck with the spring rate they have, where with the Strange, we'll be able to put any spring rate on we want. So that's coming.